Hey folks, welcome to the Bass Shed Podcast. My name is Ryan Roberts. Alright, so today on the show is Jason Heath. Jason is the host of Contrabass Conversations, which is a podcast about, you guessed it, contrabass. Jason also has a blog called the Double Bass Blog that he's been doing for a while. He started that back in 2005. So that's about 15 years old. The podcast is roughly 13 years old, and it's a great time in the world. It's a great time in the world to have Jason on the podcast because he's got such a strong online presence, and right now that's where all musicians are turning to, is having an online presence, either really investing more time, because they have it, into their online presence, or really beginning to have that and solidify that. And so it was great to have Jason on the podcast talking about that. I was a guest on his show, I think last week. We did that interview, and I will be letting you know when that episode comes out. And it was a similar conversation to. I feel like this conversation was almost an extension of that conversation, which is fun. It wasn't. It was the same casual, relaxed conversation about just what we're up to. And so, it was an honor for me to be on the Contrabass Conversations. And that podcast was a big inspiration to me. When starting this, I remember my friend Gary Wicks, who's been a guest on the show, telling me about it when I think he came out to a gig I was playing or something. And he had been listening to it and told me about it. And so I quickly downloaded it and became a fan. And so I was honored to be on his show, and I was honored to have him on mine. And it's a very, very poignant time in the world to hear from someone who has a very strong online presence, and what he went through with all that, and his story within that. Speaking of what we're going through right now with the Corona-19, and how it's affecting us so deeply as musicians. I was speaking with Dan Lakin yesterday on the phone, and him and I are putting together some content-based things. The basses are still up and going. I still play his D Lakin jazz. And if while you're at home, if you'd like a new bass, hit up Dan Lakin. Tell him Ryan Roberts sent you. Dan is definitely interested to talk to people about what their specific needs are with the instrument, and he prefers that conversation. So it's very much your instrument. You can hit him up. There's a link at thebassshed.com. But that conversation was interesting, just about what's going to be happening with manufacturers, and what maybe once the dust settles on this a little bit, and we all kind of get into a rhythm of what the world's going to be like for a little while. Maybe folks will be buying basses. Maybe folks will be interested in basses. I'm not sure. I know while I'm stuck at home, I've been transcribing a ton to bring new courses to you folks. Ray Brown will be released April 1st. Maybe probably before that. It'll probably be before that, but no later than April 1st. That'll be the course for that month. I've added some to the Sting, the collection of Sting bass lines. I'm launching Chuck Rainey. It's either Paul Chambers or Scott LaFaro that's coming next. Like some of these Ray Browns were pretty rhythmically. They took me a little bit longer than I had anticipated for some of these solos, and also dealing with just upright transcriptions, like you're dealing with recording quality, So there's some of it was recording quality. Although I did a bass line and a solo off We Get Requests. This I'm talking about Ray Brown now. In my head, I jumped there. I want to make sure I do that verbally as well, which is one of my favorite records with Ray on it, because I do like the recording quality of it. It's recorded very clear. Where, I also love the record This Is Ray Brown, but that's got a different recording quality on it. And it was difficult to get some of that material transcribed, because I definitely looked into some tracks off that one too, because I like the record. So that's what's going on. There's things happening at the Bass Shed. I've also gotten emails about what's the deal with the Bass Shed, right? I've gotten some emails like that. The deal with the Bass Shed is, I think, after you get your fundamentals together with, like, these are scales, knowing your instrument, being able to produce a solid sound on either instrument, the electric or the upright. You kind of have some fundamentals down. The only way, in my opinion, the only way to continue learning is to learn from records. Hands down, that's my thing. That's my specific personal approach. If you're a jazz player, there's you transcribe something, you go through, find some vocabulary things you like. You find some vocabulary things you like, then you practice that in all 12 keys, but it's got context. So that's my thing. There's a ton of books on the market, and those are good, and those can be useful, and I'm not knocking those. All I'm saying is, for me, the only way to do it is to go to the record. You're going to get all the nuance of their playing. It's going to help your ears. It's going to help your time feel. It's going to help almost every aspect of your playing, because you're not isolating just a scale or a specific fingering of something, although you do have to work those things out and be aware of them when you're doing the transcriptions. But the deal with the bass shed is I'm teaching transcriptions. I'm teaching that. Now, this is a long road to hoe because there's so much recorded music in the world. Long road to hoe, tough road to hoe. Anyway, so yes, it's a building process. So if you go to the bass shed, and I did receive an email about that there's not enough transcriptions up there. And I graciously replied to that gentleman. Yeah, it takes some time. I'm not done. I'm in it, all right? I'm in it. I'm doing this for a long time because I love doing it. That's why. And actually, Jason and I will talk about that and finding a process that I could identify with. I'm not interested in teaching scales. I've been teaching the electric bass and upright for a long time. I started, whatever. I'm not going to go into my personal story. I'm here to set up the episode with Jason. So I'm going to shut up. Here's my talk with Jason Heath.
The world changed so quickly. Like we were talking, it was like slightly over a week ago, right? And
yeah,
I think everything was shut down at that point in LA and San Francisco here, or maybe but I mean, it's like a week seems like an eternity ago.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, right. It's very bad. Remember the good old days when you could go to a restaurant.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, I was just texting back and forth with my friend Lauren Pierce, and it occurred to me that 3 weeks ago we were hanging out, and I think someone mentioned in passing, oh yeah, the coronavirus, or in China or something like that. And I think that was the only mention 3 weeks ago. Fast forward 3 weeks. What a difference. 21 days makes.
Oh my gosh. It's yeah. Yeah, now I get, the city of Los Angeles is sending me text messages somehow with updates about what's going on. And yeah, that all escalated quickly. Everything good up there? Everybody happy and healthy and everything's all right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just me and my wife in terms of family here, and then I got family scattered all over the place, including Southern California. But everybody seems fine. My wife is still going to work because she's a doctor. I'm finding myself with like everybody with a bunch of time on my hands. Probably unlike everybody, I was scheduling a bunch of time to be on my hands right around now. So what's really changed for me is the total absence of bars, restaurants, social events, total panic on the news 24/7. So that's all different. But in terms of what if you just put all that on mute and you just followed me around during the day, I would be doing right now exactly what I probably would have been doing without this pandemic, which is so kind of weird.
Yeah, with the exception of not playing gigs.
Well, yeah, I'm not. Well, yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's interesting.
So like I doing the whole online thing that I've been doing. It's kind of a blessing in disguise, with the exception that there's a virus attached to it.
Right.
Right. But I get a lot of time to dedicate to what I'm doing with transcriptions and all that, and shooting videos and. I got a lot of time to get into that all, so that's great.
Well, it's interesting
for me,
because
not for the rest of the world who's actually panicking about a virus. That's not cool.
Well, it is interesting though, because what you're doing, or what I'm doing, in a sense, or a lot of other people that have been doing stuff online for a period of time. I'll bet a lot of people out there are looking around and probably looking at what you're doing or what I'm doing or what other people, in different niches are doing, and thinking about what they can do, because it's
Sure.
and so you were very prescient, I guess, but probably didn't want it to be this reason, but kind of
Sure.
building out that portfolio career into things that can scale, like the Bass Shed and everything you're doing with it. So
Yeah. I mean, it's I remember asking myself, for different reasons, not because of global panic, but because of I think innate musician frustration, asking myself at some points, like, well, if playing never changes and gigs are still paying, what they're paying in a couple of years, there's no way that this can happen. You can't play enough of them. I mean, you can't play enough of them in a month right now sometimes.
yeah,
Uh, there's got to be something after this. Not that playing live will ever stop or not be a part of my life. Being able to actually be around people is a big part of that, but we'll see what happens there.
yeah,
But once that's, once that comes back around, playing live will still be a thing, but you can't. I was thinking, like, well, there's got to be something else, just as an occupational outlet for this, and like, well, I got to get into the online thing now, and like really make that and that was a few years ago that I started.
yeah.
But that perfect segue. Let's get into Contrabass Conversations.
Absolutely.
So you've been doing it 13 years? I think you told me that.
13 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Congratulations.
It would be a teenage child if it were alive.
Who was on episode 1?
Oh, so episode 1 and episode 2 and episode 3 were just solo shows with me alone, as I was trying to figure out how to put it together. And not that I go back and obsessively listen to my early shows, but every once in a while, if I really want to cringe, I do. And I love counting all the things that are wrong with it. Number one, I've got this Apple Loops electric bass loop for my double bass oriented podcast. So there's that.
Right. Is the intro to Seinfeld for Contrabass Conversations?
Not far off. And then I was thinking it would be some sort of NP. I don't know what I was thinking. But my first actual guest was the 4th episode, and it's a good friend of mine for years and years named Andy Anderson. He's a bassist in the Lyric Opera of Chicago, and teaches at a couple colleges in Chicago, plays in the Grant Park Symphony. Great guy. And he and I filmed this sort of, or it was something that was actually an influence on Jeff Chalmers, who started Discover Double Bass. We filmed with my Canon Pixma, my 2 megapixel camera, in his basement, this series of 10 5-minute YouTube videos, because that was back in the day when your YouTube videos couldn't be over 10 minutes or something like that.
Okay.
And some of those videos are up to, I think, 300,000 views on YouTube.
Okay.
So it's crazy. And that was right around the same time, I think 2006, 2007, somewhere in there. So he was my first guest, and it was just with my Zoom H2 on his table and us talking. And it was great. I think it was actually one of my better episodes those first few years, because it was with a friend. It was live.
Sure.
It was someone I knew really well. I knew a lot about him. So he was the first.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what was the impetus for starting a podcast? Because those aren't what they are now. Like now it's a whole movement. Now it's kind of everybody's got one.
Yeah, it's like a required tab on your website now. If you get your Squarespace website, one of the default tabs is podcast. So you click and there's nothing there, right?
Yeah, it just comes with the template.
which is funny because it's so much easier, in my opinion. I've put way less effort into YouTube than I have into podcasting, but like, I think it's so much easier to start a YouTube channel. I think the default should be, I'm sure there's no default tab, but you know,
Right.
it is such a common thing. I mean, for me, it was just, I got into podcasting in 2005. I think I really started to dig the format, and Leo Laporte, This Week in Tech, and all these other podcasts that he has was a huge influence. I got my iPod video, the I don't know, 2005 edition or whatever. It was the first one that had a color screen that you could watch. And it was when Apple had added TV. I think I'm getting this right. It added TV shows to the iTunes store. So you could,
Okay.
so I remember buying all of Lost. So this is setting the, setting the time, and watching Lost on this like postage stamp screen, you know,
Yeah.
in front of my TV, which I could have turned on. But I just was so obsessed with the idea. And so like,
That's
yeah.
so American.
Right, I know. But you know, clicking around the iTunes store, I saw this other option besides TV and whatever. I saw podcasts, and I think Leo Laporte was one of the recommended things. And I sort of descended into this technology podcast world that I don't really listen to a lot of those anymore. But that it's all I listen to. I stopped listening to the radio and started listening to those. And one of my first questions was, "Is there a double bass podcast?" And you know what? There was a double bass podcast.
Really?
Yeah, this guy, I believe his name is Peter Jones, and he plays or played, I'm not sure if he's still in the Tenerife Symphony in the Canary Islands. And man, talk about a guy that was early to the game. He started a podcast and basically pod faded before podcasting was even a thing. Like, I think his show went from like, it was in 2005, and I think it basically ended in 2006. So I think he did 6 episodes or something like that. I haven't checked to see if he brought it back, but I checked over the years, and So I thought, well, I want more than these 6 episodes. So that got the gears turning. And I was already blogging. I'd been blogging and had gotten some attention in like 2005, 2006, and but I spent some time planning it out. I thought, let's try to do it right and get some good gear. And of course, I did everything wrong, but I still tried my best. And so launched it January 1st, 2007.
Oh man, see, like, good for you for like doing some prep work. I remember like I was thinking about it, and I had started listening to some podcasts to like kind of get a feel for how different people were conducting theirs and sorting through them and kind of adopting ideas and stuff. And I was driving to a gig with a guitar player, and I was telling him about it. He's like, "When do you want to start?" I'm like, "I don't know. Like, you want to do the first one tomorrow?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Sure." I'm like, "All right, cool. I'll be over at 2." And
You know what, though?
there's nothing. And then that whole night I'm, Googling like how to start a podcast. I had no idea what I was doing, but I had to just start.
Well, you know what, though? If someone asked me what to do, I would tell them to do what you did, versus
Really?
Obsessively fretting and not launching it. Right? I mean, I think I was planning for 6 months. I wasn't like I was like, I think all I ended up doing was like in the 6 months was buying a mic and like thinking about how to do it. But I didn't know. I mean, you just got to get out there and suck at it for a while and make it better. And I mean, everybody I've listened to, even people who their first episodes are pretty good, it's always better, 6 months down the line, a year down the line. And so it's just the same thing with like trying to do YouTube videos or write or anything. And I'm so rusty when I get back, like I'm getting back into doing YouTube videos, and like I couldn't remember how to do anything. I couldn't remember like how to like do a ripple edit in Premiere Pro. I couldn't remember like what do I do with that? What's that lens that's better? Where's my tripod? So like just getting into a rhythm and just putting it out there, and so that I would do what you did in hindsight.
I think there's just something to getting outside of your own head about it. I remember the first episode. A good friend of mine, Nadav Paled, great guitar player, and the whole time I was thinking, while we were doing the interview, is about that it's public. I kept thinking that it was public, and so I'm trying to, like, that was always in the back of my head as if I was public speaking or something. But it's a really good friend of mine, so then I couldn't kind of I couldn't just naturally have a conversation, kind of. Like, I was in my head about it too much. And the same happened with videos.
Mhm.
I was just always in my head and thinking about the fact that it's public instead of just, like, forget that it's public. Like, right now,
Yeah.
it's not. Like, just commit to the fact that it's not right now, because it's not. Then that,
Yeah.
it took me a long time to just kind of let that seep in.
Yeah, that's interesting. For me, I think podcasting has gotten to be very similar to how I just talk to somebody in real life. I don't know if one. I think actually doing the podcast has influenced the way I talk to people outside of doing the podcast. It's maybe a better listener and a bit. I'm kind of interrupting you here and there, so apologies. But I think I've been in general, I've been better at not interrupting and just like listening to people and taking some time. But man, something about that video camera. I turned that on and I have a hard time like being myself. And
Really?
I show my wife, some of these videos and she's like, must do even more cocaine is like the impression that I'm sending, It's like this, like amped up. So anyway, that's my own struggle.
No, I remember the last time we spoke, there's a story about you doing YouTube videos or video lessons that got rated.
Oh yeah, I did not tell you that story on my podcast.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay,
Right,
so
we saved it.
okay, so I've had an interesting. I'll preface it with a short story. Before I moved to San Francisco, which is 5 years ago, I did a bunch of things. I was in education. I taught at university there. I ended up teaching high school full time for a while, high school orchestra. I played a lot of gigs, and I decided when we moved out here, my wife got a job out here. We moved out here. I just decided to try to do something else and pretend the podcast was my job. I think we talked about this a little bit on my show, and it sort of has become my job. And part of what has become my job is working as a consultant for a variety of companies or coming on as an advisor, which is very cool. So one of the companies that I was working with in 2018? Yeah, it basically was the entire year of 2018. Started at the very end of 2017. It was a company called Musicians Toolkit. And it was just like the perfect synthesis of everything that I'm, thought of as somewhat of an expert in. It was like education, especially like the public school education world, string playing in general, bass, and just kind of like synthesizing all of that together. So this company, what appeared to be very well funded. They were a part of a conglomeration, is that the right term? A group of companies owned by somebody named Galen Rust. And they were based in Salt Lake City, and they just seemed like and were for a while, from my perception, just like a great bunch of folks to work with. And they actually were. Everybody that I was actually working with was wonderful. They filmed over 100 courses with some former Beach Boys. I think they did something with some big pop stars. Even they did some like shorter courses with them, and then they were building up this big library of content for every instrument for like K-12 education.
Okay.
And finding ways to incorporate into the classroom and working with teachers. So I was their orchestra liaison. So I was reaching out to teachers all over the place and reaching out to people to set up content. And so you'd fly into Salt Lake City and you'd do some courses with them, and they'd pay you for your time and expenses and everything, and you get a royalty, on top of that. So it's a pretty good deal. And then I went down, and so we got violin courses, viola courses, cello courses. They had a bass course, but they wanted me to do a bass course. So I went down, filmed a bass course, prepped for the bass course. So this is like March of 2018. And that was a great experience. They had a whole production crew. They had a whole facility, like all these rooms. It was like a real studio. And their emblem on the wall and everything. And that was cool. And I didn't know when it was coming out, but great experience. Okay, so then December 2018, I'm getting ready to go to this clinic, and I'm going to be at their booth. They have booths at all these different music education events, and they were going to have time with Jason so people could come by and take photos for what if I don't think I would have had much of a fan club there, but it didn't happen because that same day I was talking about those things on the phone. A couple hours later, I get a call from the vice president of the company. And he says the FBI just raided our company and seized everything. And we don't know exactly what's going on, but we just wanted to let the advisory board know. And this is like 4 p.m. on a Friday or something. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. Went out with my wife that night, and I'm like, guess what just happened? This is not the phone call I was expecting. So the weekend happened, and then Monday, we get this email: Musician's Toolkit is no more. And then all these like government sort of document emails and all sorts of stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, what is happening here? And I get on the Google and do a little research and get in and start reading one of the papers in probably the main paper in Salt Lake City. Can't remember the name, but so Galen Rust owned 11 companies. One of them, Rust Rare Coin, had been brought up on charges for running this massive Ponzi scheme. I think they duped investors of somewhere between $200 and $300 million over the last decade, I think. Something like that. I might be getting the details not quite right, but it was something like that. Yeah. What? So so all those and the FBI, I guess, had been on him for years, and wiretaps and documents and all sorts of stuff. And I mean, this was somebody I had gotten to know a bit through these. We do Zoom calls. Speaking of something everybody's learning how to use right now, Zoom. We had monthly board meetings, and so it was a shock. And so I went deep into the rabbit hole on that one, learned everything I could about it. Luckily, none of us advisors were culpable. I had already gotten paid for what I wasn't going to get royalty, obviously, from the course since it never came out. Sure. And that's the funny thing is I never saw the course. It never came out. So the FBI has seized my bass course. It's in some vault somewhere.
So there's some agents like working on Boeing right now. Well, thanks to you.
Somebody is like getting to like the octave harmonic on the G string, thanks to me. But the silver lining in that one, for which I think is a good lesson just to take to anything, is like that doing that course served multiple purposes for me. Like one thing is it was something that I got paid for and did, but it also kind of taught me how to do something like that. And then I had created all these materials from the course, and this is way before the whole thing went belly up. I took all of those and put them into a PDF download that has been like my email opt-in, and it's something that people can voluntarily throw some change at, which a lot of people probably right now are looking at doing, through Patreon or whatever. But that has generated way more income than what I got paid for the course. Just that one PDF.
Wow.
I know, right? And yeah, I know. And that was the genesis of what ended up becoming 2 courses that I just filmed with Discover Double Bass. Now, I hope I'm not like a bad penny and I just bring ruin to any online course. So Jeff Chalmers, if you're listening, I don't think I'm a bad penny. So maybe you'll never see a bass course from me. I'm just like I don't want to say virus.
That's a long way to put together a PDF. Like it's a really involved process to get a PDF together. But
what a PDF, right?
Exactly. I mean, if you get another PDF out of it, well then Discover Double Bass can have some of that.
I know. So anyway, that's sort of but I like thinking about that. I think the podcast has been something like that for me too. Like there are multiple benefits to doing the podcast. One of which is that there's a show people can watch. Another is I get to reach out and meet new people. Another is just self-education. Then it's just one of those things like working out or a lot of other good. I just think of it as like a good habit. So And I think the same thing about writing or filming videos or whatever. I mean, I would, of course, like people to read my stuff, watch my stuff, listen to my stuff. But in a way, I almost don't care because I'm benefiting from the process of just getting better at doing these things.
Yeah. Right. No, I agree with all that. All those things have happened with me too. I mean, it does take time, and like there is a survival aspect. So if people do check it out, then maybe I could at least break even on my time financially. But other than that, like it's the podcast is a labor of love for me, and I love doing it. Hopefully, people are enjoying it.
I've thought, I think we may have talked about this when we were chatting for my show, but one thing, and this is probably not of much comfort in the short term to people who are finding all their work disappear, but I found that anytime I focus on trying to monetize the crap out of something I'm doing, it never works.
Right.
And then whenever I just think about doing something that I find interesting and I get obsessed with it, the money follows. Now, that advice may not hold in this new reality we're living in. It might not hold for me. It might not work for anybody, but I have found that over the 13 years I've been doing this, anytime I try to chase something or make something work, and that could just be my fault. I'm just not good at it. But that's the lesson I've found is like I things have worked out for me in so many ways online, I think, but it's anytime I've tried to make it work, that project like fails. Like I tried to do an online course about like getting better at social media, and that was like I realized it was a failure the moment I launched it. Yeah, I know. I realized it was a failure the moment I launched it. I don't even think I think I launched it and put out like one post somewhere about it, and then just let it like wither and die.
Yeah.
And I've got other projects like that too. So.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it was actually something that I know we talked about this earlier, and I know I've had this conversation with other people at different times on the podcast enough. The comedians have been a big inspiration to me in this kind of do-it-yourself market. And it was something I heard Jerry Seinfeld say on Comedians in Cars about, I can't remember the exact quote. I just remember that's kind of where it really hit me, was when I was watching that show. Maybe it wasn't even on the show. I don't know. But I know it happened while I was watching a show.
Yeah.
About like making the process just something you love.
Mm-hmm.
Just if the process is something you love, then cool. And not only do I love playing the bass, and obviously I love music and all that, but like within that, when getting into the online situation, I had to find something that I could. I don't teach any kind of beginner bass things at all. Like I'm not interested. I've taught for a long time, and there's, as far as I'm concerned, more than enough resources out there, and no one needs to hear me talk about it. And I don't need to try to like squeeze my way into that. Like, hey guys, I can talk about scales too. Come over here. Hey, no, they're major and minor. Come on over. Like, right. I don't need to go. I don't need to go put my time there. And so I got into something that I'm just really, really passionate about, which is learning from records. And I absolutely love that. And I try to do the same thing. I try to make the process something that it's not a business venture where I'm just trying to launch a business to, make a business just for the sake of like, this will make me money. This is really just something I love doing, and I would be doing anyways.
Yeah. That's a good thing to focus in on, if you can find something that you would be doing anyways. And I love your spin. I love the spin on just learning that you're taking with that. I think it's really interesting. And you have like an endless supply of records from which to draw on. But I think that's and you're right. If you think, I'm just going to try to squeeze into that, I mean, if you really were into it, I'm sure you'd want to do it, and you do a fabulous job.
If that was the passion, then maybe it would, work.
Yeah. It's so interesting. It's so interesting over the years to look at different things I've done, whether it's blog, podcast, video. Much less of that has hit that I've done, certainly. But and what really has resonated with people and what hasn't. I mean, I hope that I haven't put out anything besides that social media course that I didn't really feel good about.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting, and so often I'm off the mark in what connects and what doesn't. And you know what? Usually, what does connect is something that someone else suggested to me that I didn't come up with on my own. So again, maybe I'm just I've been doing this long enough that I think I think I've gotten better at seeing the kernel of an idea that's sort of like floating through these like endless streams of communication that we have, and kind of building on that and running with it. So what from and so that's something like that has been fun, and then trying to figure out what format to use that to, what should I create, some sort of like blog post or online resource, or should I like do a podcast about this thing, or should I try to put together some sort of one-off experience? So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to see what has and hasn't connected over the years with people.
And then, but starting, I don't know about starting, by having an online presence, this has opened up opportunities offline, correct, for you also, right? Like you go and do clinics and master classes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And it's funny
opened up a lot of that.
Yeah, and it's who knows? I kind of took a detour for 7-8 years in the middle of. I've sort of got these online careers that are bookended, and in the middle is where I basically stopped doing it at all for all those years and just taught high school full time, and a bunch of like back 2005, 2006, 2007, around there. I'd started blogging, and I started the podcast, and a bunch of opportunities came out of that, including like speaking, presentations, being brought into places. And at the same time, I had decided to go back to school because I was just sick of freelancing and I wanted to do something else. And I thought, you know what's stable? Public education. Well, now here as we chat, March 24th, 2020, maybe not, but it certainly was.
Podcasting is more stable, actually.
You never would have thunk it. But so I was getting some good. So who knows if I hadn't gone off and done that, what I would be doing now. But I intentionally, 5 years ago, when I knew I was moving out here, I just started spending all my free time relaunching the podcast, which had just, I've been basically 7 years, not much came out on it. I think for 5 years, like not one thing came out. I just like paid the hosting fee and it was just sat there. So a lot has come these last 5 years, but it took a little while. Well, by 2017, I had a lot of opportunities rolling in, but I mean, I'd already had built up some stuff from the previous, foray into online ventures. And so I think the big challenge that probably people that are starting to think about doing maybe something along the lines of what you or I do is I do think it takes time. It takes time to build a reputation, to build trust. Maybe you already have a reputation. If you're a well-known artist, that's great. But I think for most other people, it's not, you don't all of a sudden start setting up your ad deals and your online events that are going to bring in hundreds of people, and your courses and your digital products and stuff. I mean, I think it just that's all good, but I think it's going to take time to have that even start to replace what most people have as traditional income sources.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm not doing that with selling the ad space and getting advertisers involved in the podcast. A big reason is I don't dedicate enough time to this to make it like the only focus. Like it's just kind of, I don't want to represent it, like I don't want to represent it like it's not important while on it. That seems funny. But it is kind of an add-on thing to everything else I'm doing.
Yeah.
With the brand, and so it's not the podcast forward.
Right.
But so I haven't just dedicated the time to like really deal with marketing and getting it plugged into all the platforms and all that stuff. I was actually just on one of the the platforms it's on earlier today and like realized, I don't know, something happened with the RSS feed and it's not, like most of the episodes aren't even on there.
Ugh. Yeah.
So I have to go back and look at that. But I didn't even know about that. So like I don't do a lot of back end on this thing where I'm always checking it out and looking how to, put it in the right places and get it out there and get it promoted, and I'm okay with that. Like I love doing this, and if someone stops by the website, they'll see that it exists and maybe they decide to listen. That's cool.
Yeah, I think that's a good strategy for sure. I think being podcast forward is a pretty hard thing to do, because it's just I think there are those that listen, and this might all change. We'll see, but at present, I think there are those that listen to podcasts and those that don't. And people that are into podcasts are really into podcasts, and then there's some percentage of the population that might check out something like that. But it's a little more of an ask than reading something or even than watching a video, which is why I would, if someone's trying to figure out how to start to do something, video would probably be the place I'd recommend, or maybe a blog plus video. But podcasting is, I think it's more work than people realize, and the audience build, while I think and these are kind of my theories that I can somewhat back up with numbers and experience, but they're still just my theories. But I think that the people that get into podcasts tend to be pretty loyal and fanatical about their podcasts. So it's great for like really building some true fans. But you're not going to have nearly as many of those people as it's just so much harder to, like, in the world we live in or have been living in or whatever. It's just so hard to pull someone into like, hey, listen to my 60-minute audio only show, versus like, hey, check out this. Like I was just watching one of your preview videos for upcoming something that you got coming out of the Bass Shed, or maybe it's already out.
Okay.
Like that's something I could just boom, watch, done, right?
Yeah.
Podcasting, it's like, even though it's not that hard to subscribe, it's still like, and then, when I'm going to find some time to do this. But when those that do find that time, you can really, I think that bond becomes pretty powerful.
I think so too. I'm also interested to see what happens to the nature of podcast listeners, both just as kind of an observer of culture right now, and as a podcaster. When people can't, when they're not driving as much. Yeah. I mean, that was personally, that was my go-to. I would never sit at home and listen to a podcast. Podcasts were on in the car. And it almost felt like if you're taking a road trip or something and you put on one of your favorite podcasts, like now you got a road buddy. It's somebody you're familiar with in the car. And if you're going to be, in the car for a little while, then it's like a little mini road trip you're taking with them or something. Yeah. And then I would always listen in the car. And so now, since there's not, it's not that we can't drive under what things are right now, but there's leaving the house and getting out is not as regular.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And so I'm curious what that's going to do to podcasting versus things like actually having some kind of video material or something that somebody can play or read, or things that are more that you got to be home for.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. It's funny because my podcast, back when I had a full-time job and I was gigging all the time back in Chicago before I moved out here, that's also where I would listen to podcasts pretty much exclusively in the car. But then I got into the habit of kind of having them on. I love cooking, so when I'm cooking, I usually listen to when I'm working out. And it's funny, I think a lot of people now are starting to experience what my life has been like when I'm not on the road, because like we haven't had a car for the last few years, so we walk everywhere. I spend a lot of time at home, working at home, and so I still listen to a lot of podcasts, but I do it when I'm working out, I do it when I'm cooking, I do it like in those interstitial times when I'm cleaning and stuff like that. Yeah, it'll be interesting. For me, what I'm trying to do, and I'm just sort of letting I'm just sort of like, I'm here. Boy, man, I don't know how about you, but I open up my email and like the volume of email has gone up like
Yeah.
five times what it was. And a lot of people from my podcast world emailing too. And so I'm sort of just like listening and trying to see what a lot of people are starting to have to do, kind of what I've been doing just in terms of using these tools. So the last couple of weeks, I've just been trying to think of ways to put out, like last week, I put out something I called the Newbie's Guide to Teaching Online. And
Okay.
people had said, Jason, how do I do this? And I thought, okay, well, how would I do that? And I look at my pile of, $1,000 worth of audio gear and this and that. And I thought, hold on a second. Nobody's got any money right now.
Right.
Like the advice of, hey, go buy a bunch of expensive stuff, while ultimately the right advice is not the helpful advice for when the economy's collapsing, you have to figure something out. So my first video was like how to do something when you got just your phone or maybe something. And so what I was just working on before we were talking is like, okay, now you're going, but now you realize it's a nightmare to listen to a double bass, through like a phone speaker. So now this is all about like using like a Zoom H6 and I'm just trying to put out stuff that I think would be helpful, to people right now. So that's just sort of like been my focus these last few weeks, and who knows where that'll take me. But man, I got all this archived content before the pandemic, and it's all coming out, and I'll preface it with like, rewind 2 months and listen. But boy, does it seem strange to just hear this happy-go-lucky stuff just right at this moment. I think people will actually enjoy listening to that and get a break from all the dark news. But in terms of like not the stuff that's not archived, I'm just trying to think of what I can do to be helpful to people in terms of the skills that I've built up.
Yeah. No, that's great. It is interesting to see what kind of, how a lot of, like and you've done this too. I've dedicated a big part of myself to having an online presence, and I've, like it's been a few years behind the scenes before anybody even knew about really what I was up to. And I would get emails and stuff like, dude, well, like, everything kind of sounds cool, but like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, I know. Like, just give it time. I have a concept and it's slowly unfolding. But it's been kind of incubating for a while, and now it's an interesting time, because now a lot of people I know, and just by being on social media at all, everybody's trying to kind of bum rush the market, so to speak. And I get it. Like we're all trying to figure out what this is and how long it's gonna last, and what does that mean for us right now, and what does that mean for the occupation of musicians who are, normally they could perform and like, have a studio and they would, produce on the side. Well, now you can't do really any of that. So what is for right now, it's a completely online occupation. So everybody's trying to figure that out, and I'm interested to kind of see if the dust settles a little bit on this pandemic, and hopefully we're not going to be under the quarantine thing for too much longer, but who knows? I don't really know. Nobody does.
Yeah, for sure.
I would love the idea of we can all kind of go back to where we were, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And I mean, like if you zoom way out, I highly doubt that we've seen the end of live performance.
Sure.
I can't conceive of that. Probably most people can't, but I do. If there are probably lots of lessons to draw, but one for musicians is it's probably a good idea to have a side hustle. And it's probably good to have multiple streams of income, and it's probably good to have at least a few of them be online and not relying on being in person. And if for nothing else, then the thinking about scalability, like if you're trading, and this is something you and I certainly know, but a bunch of people are probably starting to think about, but you're limited by the hours in the day and where you can put your body, right? If you're playing in Pasadena, you're not going to be playing in New York City that same same night. I think that's obvious, but like when, you know, you can only play so many gigs, and you have to, and with travel and all that. So trying to find something like an online course, like teaching multiple people in that sort of fashion, like having any sort of revenue stream that doesn't trade time for dollars and is location based. I mean, I think that's valuable. Maybe it's not everything you do. In fact, it's probably not what everybody wants to be doing, or could be doing, even if they wanted to be doing. But having something or some component of your experience that translates into online, it's some way that you're performing performances can have some sort of online component to them too, or experience to them too, or something like that, that you're teaching could be like that. Then any sort of side hustle you have beyond that could, you know, be that doesn't require your physical presence somewhere. I think it's important.
I agree. I completely agree.
Right.
With
probably a lot of people agree right now, you know, a lot more than they did a month ago. So
exactly. I mean, I'm not apprehensive to talk about it. I don't ever, and I'm maybe you feel the same way too, that I think a lot about having an online presence. Obviously I'm spending a lot of time working at, you know, continuing to go cultivate that, but it's, I don't want to ever communicate myself as that I'm just kind of like, oh, here's a niche in the market, let me go, you know, grab this because it's just business. It's really like the business is secondary. I'm hoping that it'll, you know, kind of pan out and it could be a nice little part of what I do within music, but it's not, it's the passion is really like getting into records and geeking out on, you know, the difference between what I just shot a video on Chuck Rainey a few days ago. So that was still kind of on my mind. Like what Chuck Rainey did in chorus 1 versus chorus 2 to develop his bass line. Like that's what excites me. And I hope that all that stuff comes across in what I do online. And what I did want to ask you about is you do have a strong online presence, but what is the passion when you're not online within music, when it's not related to an online commerce sphere? Well, what's the passion? Is the passion truly playing? Do you write? Do you really get into like one-on-one education?
I really have enjoyed. I mean, I love playing the bass, of course, and the concert experience. You know, that I ending your day with applause is kind of a cool way to end your day. You know,
Yeah.
If I go back to like when I decided to go into music education, I really thought I was going to quit performing professionally back.
Oh, wow.
This is 13 years ago, I guess, when I was starting the podcast. So the teaching, it's funny because I thought I was going to take that passion and you know, Mike Rowe of Dirty Jobs has a great line. He says, you know, the advice you always hear is find your passion. And Mike Rowe might be kind of misquoting, but he said, you don't find your passion, you take your passion with you. And I like that idea. I think I took that passion that I was pouring into the bass, and I really just became fascinated by conducting and working with high school age students and finding ways to motivate and become a better conductor and learning how to read a score. And I just got totally fascinated with that. And when I was getting into podcasting, I was totally fascinated with that. So, you know, I've had, I think I just, with whatever I'm doing. And then the last couple of years, kind of trying to answer your question, the last couple of years, ever since I decided to get out of freelancing, which never really happened completely, but back 13 years ago, I kind of quit practicing the bass very much. And I think I'd been practicing the bass for kind of the wrong reasons, or not that there are wrong reasons, but I was just focused on getting an orchestra job. And I was doing, I didn't learn a new piece in 10 years. I was just practicing excerpts. And then I got into this doing this stuff online. I became fascinated with it. I mean, I didn't ever totally stop practicing, but it was like priority number 10, at
Sure.
best. And then teaching, through that, and then even moving out here to San Francisco, I thought I would get back into practicing, and it just didn't happen. It was just try to like get ready for something that was coming up. And I mean, I was still getting good gigs, and I was subbing with the San Francisco Symphony and doing stuff like that, but I wasn't like passionate about playing my bass. And about 2 years ago, I discovered, this is so funny that this is what got me back into practicing the bass, but I discovered this app called Modacity that ironically it was started by a guy named Mark Gelfo. And at the time, his company was working on the street I live on in San Francisco.
Oh,
so
wow.
like I was a totally like, they reached out to me out of the blue, and I did a little research, and I'm like, wait a minute, they're on my block, or 2 blocks down. And so I got together with Mark. We've become friends, and which is great. That's been wonderful. But the app itself kind of fooled me into getting into practicing again. So it sort of gamified practicing in a way. It work. It's kind of like a workout app, but for practicing. But there's more to it than that. But long story short, and I could talk about Modacity forever, so I'll stop myself. But at
least explain it to me. What is the concept of the app? Like what?
It's an app that is very simple, but it's doing something that's deep, which is my favorite kind of app. What it's trying to do is get you to think more about practicing more in a more deliberate fashion, deliberate practice,
Is it a music-based app? It's directed at the musician? Okay.
It is, it's built by me. Mark's a French horn player. He played in the Hong Kong Philharmonic for a bunch of years, but he was a cognitive science major. So it takes cognitive science and fuses it into music practice. So it is so cool, and it does it in a really clean and subtle way. So it kind of, just by the way it's set up, it kind of fools you into practicing better. Like the interface, it has 2 things up front and center. It's a very clean interface. It's got a timer that's just counting how long you've been practicing that thing, and a record button. And just having that up front and center it immediately made me start thinking about how much time I'm spending on something, because I'm seeing that.
Sure.
And then it made me, even though I've carried around some device that can record myself for 20 years at least, with tape recorders and stuff, it made me go from never recording myself when I'm practicing to recording myself all the time, like in my personal practicing, not for like videos or whatever. And it got me back into practicing. I have learned like 8 or 9 new pieces since using this app, and even during this pandemic, and many of which I played live. But even these last couple of weeks, that has been like, I haven't for whatever reason, I haven't wanted to play the bass at all. I've been kind of like depressed about bass playing. Probably understandable, but that app has still kept me practicing.
I think we all go through that, and it's healthy to talk about.
For sure. So anyway, that app it's made it so when I had like 20 minutes of time where I could practice, go back 5 years, I never would have practiced. No way. Right. I pull up my bass and I practice, because I have a practice list in there that's 20 minutes long. I just hit it. It's like it's a similar motivation that I have with like, tracking going to the gym with my, not that I'm doing that these days because of the pandemic, but
nobody's going anywhere actually. But at the gym, nothing.
So I have really had a sort of like kind of had a renewed excitement about practicing the bass in the last couple of years, totally independent of anything online. Just by that app, that I never thought an app would get me back into practicing bass, but it totally has.
Yeah, but that's kind of cool, because it recenters the instrument kind of almost maybe to where it began, which is something that's just for you, because, you get to check out a little bit and just spend time with the bass. And, I know when I started playing, like, that was a thing. Like, it just, all right, what was I was in high school. I'm like, all right, I'm done riding my bike with my friends, or like I'm done doing my schoolwork, or convincing my mom that I did my schoolwork and did not.
Right.
But I'm checking out a little bit. I'm just going to go over here by myself and have some, kind of alone time with the instrument.
Yeah.
And then once it turns into an occupation, and I know I've talked about this in different, with different people. Well, once it turns into an occupation, it takes on something different.
Yeah.
And you kind of lose that kind of fundamental quality. And it's a chore sometimes to protect that and still stay personally connected to the instrument outside of an occupation. And still stay excited about it and all that. But it sounds like this app did it for you. Kind of recentered your foundational intrigue and excitement about the instrument.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And it's funny, hearing you talk about that, it's interesting to see how people keep that passion going in different ways. And me, like orchestra world being my thing, I've chatted with a lot of primarily, I've chatted with a lot of different people in symphonies about how they do that. Charles Chandler, one of the San Francisco Symphony bassists, has been on the podcast before. He is really into playing cello bass duets. He's got this duo with Amos Yang, with I believe associate principal or assistant principal with cello with San Francisco Symphony, and they play concerts all the time. He's always working up new rep, and that is just that keeps him going. And it seems like rarely is the orchestra job in and of itself enough to keep that passion going for people. That's sort of a universal I've discovered. It seems like almost everybody who's not just punching the clock, and inevitably there are some people that are just punching the clock, but almost everybody who's got that fire is keeping it going with something outside of the main gig.
Yeah, I think so. You've been in the kind of crossover working world guy thing in LA, like there's a point where you're just going to get burnt out, and it's really, you're just going to kind of go, all right, going to go make the donuts and go into the gig again. Which is such a weird way to think about it. Like if I pull myself out of that for a second and then think about it, like, yeah, quit being an idiot, Ryan. Like, like you get to go play music for a living. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
Like, it's still pretty fantastic, but you play the same thing over and over again, or it's, maybe it's a little circuit of gigs that I'm doing for a few months on end or something. It's just like, all right, well, I'm doing this one again. Okay. And it is easy for me to kind of just get in this rut, and then my playing gets in a rut, and then I'm not bringing my best to the gig because I'm in the rut, my playing's in a rut, and there's just not this kind of freshness involved. I think there does have to be something to kind of protect the self-care musician. I know I've talked about that with a bass player named John Herrera on a podcast about just protecting the kind of maybe it's related to a relationship, protecting that relationship, and like what attracted you to the person initially, and like making sure that that's always kind of alive, and you just don't get into this rut of like, it's you again. But making sure to just protect it, because I do think that it's all the relational characteristics are involved with the instrument. I think they're pretty much all there, more or less, not all.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
But it is a relationship in my life, the relationship with the bass, and I do have to work to kind of protect that relationship a little bit, with time and keeping it fresh and all those things. Otherwise, it turns into this just kind of boring, uninspired, and then I'm not excited to do it. Once it becomes that, it's just like, then that kind of funk sets in where you don't want to practice, you don't want to engage with it because it's just this thing, and that's a drag. Have you had guests on the podcast that kind of speak to that regularly? Do you find that to be something common that people are willing to talk about?
It has come up for sure. not maybe as often. I I feel like I might suffer from that a little more than a lot of the people I chat with, or maybe it's just something that maybe it's, you know what, maybe it's something I should bring up more, because I've realized sometimes there are subjects I'm not consciously not going there, but
Yeah.
I should go there. Especially things related to vulnerability, or it's so easy when you look at someone's highlight reel, to just put them on a pedestal and not be able to relate. And so I got some advice maybe 3 years ago from another guest, LA Phil bass player, David Allen Moore, about
Okay, yeah.
digging more into when you don't get the job, when everything goes off the rails, and how that felt, how you recovered, how you got out of that. But that persistent sort of, I know that a lot of people have gone through like what I went through where it was like, there's the bass, good for, and like just sort of like that's kind of slow decline.
Sure.
But yeah, I should dig into that more with people. Yeah.
And I think that it does happen even on people that maybe aren't even playing professionally. That's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, there's the bass in the corner. Yeah, I'll get to that. But it's
Yeah.
not. They're not. No, they're not excited to go pick it up or learn something new. Or I know for a long time, yeah, my relationship to what I was practicing and how excited I was to practice was directly related to what I was listening to. If I was listening to a lot of the same music, older music, like just putting on my favorite records and like checking out stuff I was comfortable with, that same mentality of just kind of like, all right, I'm going to do this again because this is comfortable and safe, translated to my practice time.
Mm.
So that I would kind of approach the practice time in a lazy way, and also just kind of play through things, maybe more on like the maintenance angle, and not really push myself to get anything new out or get anything new together. And so it's really, every time I kind of feel that starting to sit in, I immediately analyze what am I listening to and how long have I been listening to it.
Mm.
So if it's like, if I get in the car and it's just like LA radio on, and that's been the thing for like the last couple weeks or something, then it's like, okay, good to know. I've been in a rut. I haven't been checking out new music, and that same idea of not checking out new music completely permeates my practice time. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
always have to be listening to something new. That's been a big
Yeah.
one for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can totally see that happen. I think that's another reason why I feel like doing the podcast, my podcast is good for me, because it makes me go look into somebody and listen to their music, and then we chat and they give me a couple recommendations. So I
Yeah.
think that's maybe another reason why I feel like the podcast, doing it, is kind of a good habit. And then just hearing people's takes on, how do they approach practice? If it comes up, how do they approach practicing? How do they think about this or think about that? And then I go to my bass and I'm thinking about that. And I find that
Yeah.
that very, very helpful, especially because especially these days, spend so much time alone.
Yeah.
But even over the last 5 years, spend a lot of my time by myself working on projects. I think when I was in the school environment and when I was out playing orchestra gigs more, there were just so many people around. I kind of like fed off of that energy. But now
Sure.
I'm in my own head so much
Yeah.
more of the time, and that's good for what I do. I should be doing that, but I think the podcast is one of those things that helps kind of kick me out of familiar routines. Can be good, but kick me out of kind of some of the routine, mechanistic sort of qualities that you were talking about with practicing.
Yeah, I mean, even routines are good, and there's this kind of a ritualistic nature that I had to my practicing time for a while, where like, all right, I gotta go, gotta get everything set up. I gotta. Then this is when my practice time was off site. I used to teach at a guitar store, and then I had the keys to like the upstairs room, and I could just go there and practice any time of day. And so that was my practice space for a lot of years. But then it became a ritual. Like, all right, load up the bass, stop, make sure I got gas in the car, get out there, get set up, take a minute, go back in. I was wasting all this time. But it was like this little ritual of things that I would do. And like, if the ritual couldn't be completed, if I forgot something, it would completely, bump my headspace off. And like, I couldn't connect with it anymore. So I do think habits can be good, but they can also be poor. I like the idea of driving somewhere different to practice, because then I could kind of prepare my mind to just get into it. And there was this purposeful nature to it. Like, all right, I'm dedicating this time to go do this thing, instead of just pulling out the bass at my apartment, and then like something happens and I can put it down and walk away. Well, the chances of me walking back over are slim. But if I'm out there and there's no distractions and stuff, and I'm a little bit removed from my day-to-day habits, then I could get into it a little deeper. And that's always hit and miss. Sometimes I'd be out there for 45 minutes and just wasn't feeling it. Other times I'd be out there for like 4 or 5 hours. But I think that the overall habit of trying to, I equate it a lot to exercise, although I don't do that as regularly as I should. So it's funny that I use that as an analogy. But as long as you go, to the gym or wherever people go to exercise, as long as you kind of just show up, maybe it's not going to be the best workout you've ever had, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, that's something.
So
Speaking of, sorry to break it. Speaking of comedians, that's something Joe Rogan talks about a lot, because he works out all the time. But he's mentioned this many times. He's like, all right, if I go out for a run 10 times, in a row, probably 6 or 7 of those 10 times, I don't really want to go out for a run. But then you get going in a few minutes and the blood's pumping and you're like, woo, and like, do you ever come back when you do work out or when you do finish a practice session? I don't know about you, but I never think like, boy, I shouldn't have done that. It's always
right.
And go with. I do miss that. Probably everyone misses their secondary location for a lot of things right now. But I do miss. I used to also go to a different place for bass, and I think you got skin in the game at that point. Like you're saying, you've already gone there. What are you going to not practice? You weirdo. Of course you're going to practice. But here in San Francisco, the last several years, I've been going to co-working spaces probably 3-4 days a week. Who knows how that'll change in the future? But that, and what the routine I settled into, which I liked a lot, was like have one day where I just completely worked from home, because there are certain things that are inappropriate for co-working spaces, like shooting YouTube videos or stuff like that, and then 3 days I would go to the co-working space, and for like 5 hours I would just write or work on projects or business related stuff. And then I have one day, Friday, it would be my get into trouble day, although I wouldn't actually get into trouble. I would just like go do something totally different. I'd like set out on foot. I'd bring my iPad. I had no idea where it was going to end up, and I'd usually end up at a coffee shop or in a park or something, or go just do something different, but still give myself the option of working. And I came up with so many good ideas during those times. So for me, that mix, and of course my schedule is adapting, and then we're moving in the middle of all this, which is hilarious. So
you guys just got to the new place, right?
Yeah, so it's like I love the new place, but the internet and my desk are at the old place. So I'm talking to you from the old place. If I crane my neck, I can almost see the new place, which has balconies and is beautiful. But of course, like it's a weird, and then I forget my stupid, flash drive. So I got to go back to the other place and get it and all that. But of course, zooming out, like hopefully folks can do when we're, in this pandemic time, hopefully, like this is a blip on the radar long term for me, in terms of just going back and forth. So not that that's like a pandemic, but so yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to think about routines.
It is. Yeah. It's, I guess like anything. I mean, I think it's what you make of them. And I think most of it kind of depends on the person's mental, approach. If someone can approach it, well, like, you know what, it wasn't the best workout, it wasn't the best practice session, but I got those 3 measures a little bit better than I had them yesterday.
Yeah,
cool, that's a win. And I do think that's my personal way of gauging practice time is if I can leave just a little bit better than when I showed up, mission accomplished.
Yep.
That's the goal. Otherwise, like, there's so much out there to learn. I can't think about all that, about all the things I want to learn or I'm currently working on, and dedicate time to all of them and still have them and move the ball forward in all those areas. If I just leave, I feel like I was invested in the time and leave better than when I showed up. Cool, I'm good. Sometimes it's not even 3 measures.
Now that's a good lesson though, because like I think Tony Robbins said at some point something along the lines of most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year, or something to that effect. And I think that's so true. Hey, you just work on 3 bars in a day. That zoom out and look at that. That seems like not much maybe, but you're building on that every day. And I think about that in my bass playing, certainly in my online activities, business ventures, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all related in that aspect, because whether it's online or whether it's just someone's personal musicianship and their instrument, like, you're building something. You're building yourself as a musician on the bass in your practice time, or you're building, I'm building a podcast, or I'm building a website, or whatever it is. But just this thing of you're always building something. Yeah. And so just, move the ball forward a little bit every day. That's kind of how I think about it. I'm not a huge sports guy, but I really do. I watch football a lot. I'm a football fan, but I'm not a sports overall fan.
Sure.
But if you can just consistently get 3 yards a carry, you're doing a good job. Like, you don't need the big Hail Marys and the touchdown every play. Just move the ball 3 yards. And it's really kind of the slow and steady approach. And that's my thing. I mean, sometimes it works, other times it doesn't. But if I can do something every day on the bass, within my online career presence, whatever that is, I still don't even know how to talk about it. I don't know what it is.
You know what? I've struggled with that so much over the years. These days, I've just gone back to saying I'm a musician. That's and if I'm talking to somebody about like getting a loan or something like that, I tell them web design, web consultant, web design and consulting or something. I had something like I applied. We just bought a place, but prior to that, my wife wasn't she was just a resident, and back to the freelance musician career, I made the mistake of putting musician on the rental application, and they were deeply suspicious. We did not get the place. The next place we applied for, I put I think web design and consulting, which is a fair description of what I do too. And they were like, welcome to the neighborhood. Here's the Bay Club right down here. Everybody else is the same thing. So I learned how to frame that. But outside of that, I just say musician, because that's what I feel like that's what I am. And musicians, you wear so many different hats, and it's all related to my musicianship, everything I'm doing.
Absolutely. I agree.
And what you were saying, that's so just like showing up, put your butt in the seat. It's like, I can't control a lot in the world, but what I can control is waking up every morning, sitting down, jotting down my thoughts, planning out the day, getting 3 things accomplished, those things, just having that, taking control of your own situation, and just trying to like move forward on a few things, and just working like a professional, showing up and doing the work. That's just what I try to do. And I
think and having the online thing, there was a point where I was releasing podcasts I was doing it every week, and I know you're doing more than that. You do two a week, right?
Yeah, mine makes no sense. Nobody do what I do. It makes no sense. It's just what I fell into. So
sure. I was trying to figure it out. Like, I actually took note of what Contrabass Conversations was doing and saw the 2. I'm like, oh, well, then 2's the thing. 2's the thing. Like, if that's what they're doing over there, like, all right, this seems to be pretty popular. They got a bunch of episodes out. All right. two's what it is. I don't even think I got 1 week of 2 podcasts out, within that week under my belt at all.
Yeah.
That's when I found out it's way more work than I thought.
It makes no sense, but it's the rhythm that I fell into several years ago, and it seems to always everything's subject to change, but that just seems to be what's been working in terms of everything.
I bring that up because I think that there's like a little bit of an accountability there.
Yeah.
That I think, like I don't want to, like I'm aware of, some of my analytics on the podcast, and like there's like, okay, I know there's folks listening, so like I want to bring them something new.
Yeah.
And there's a thing within that to continuing to show up. It's almost like there's these people I've never met, I've never talked to, I've never emailed, I have no idea who they are. But there is kind of this accountability to the listeners, or at least the idea of listeners, because I just see a screen with numbers on it. So like, okay, give them something new, bring something new out, and I want to continue to supply this for the people that are enjoying it. I'm hoping I'm taking for granted that they're enjoying it. I don't want to just listen to it regularly to complain. But so that helps me. And I think when it is online and it's all public like that, there's kind of a different, there's not motivation, but it keeps you going a little bit better, really, for me, unless I was just doing it for myself. Like there's no way I would transcribe this much if it was just for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think I did like 3 Ray Browns and 2 Sting this week. Like I've had the time, but that's all I would do is wake up.
Yeah.
All right, back to it. Maybe go walk around the neighborhood just to get some blood flowing. Come back. All right, let me see if I can finish up this solo today. There's no way it would dominate my life like that if there wasn't kind of this. I do want to share this and get this out there, and hopefully people will enjoy it, and especially now. Like I'm thinking about that. People are looking for maybe something new to play, and kind of with all the things we did talk about, staying excited about it. If I can offer them that would be great. So there's kind of a social responsibility I think I feel within all this that helps me stay a little bit more on target. And maybe you feel the same.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, I don't want to lose my streak. That's part of why I like that app Modacity. They have your practice streak in there. Or I use Duolingo to practice Spanish. I'm on like a 512-day streak on Spanish. Now, can I speak Spanish? No, sir, I cannot. But I can speak more Spanish than I could 512 days ago. Yeah. There. That's about. Yeah, I can order. I am able to get my burrito order in Spanish. The next time I'm able to leave the house and do that. I'll look forward to that.
I was actually using that app. That's a fun app. Duolingo. Yeah. I was using that to learn Italian for no reason.
Oh, cool.
I've never been to Italy. Why not? And then it's a fun app.
Oh man, hey, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we can keep going.
I was just gonna say, I don't know how your show works, but man, I would love to have you on my show again. I think of mine like a talk show. I've had people back, I think 7 times. One person has been on, so I'd love to check in with you because it's fun, especially like you and I are doing. We're not doing parallel things, but there's a lot of overlap in what we're doing. So I think we have. I'm really enjoying chatting with you for your show too. But like I think it's a really I think it's probably interesting, and especially when people are trying to figure out, and probably they're just inevitably going to have to be readjusting their careers. Probably it would be of benefit to people to hear what we're talking about in terms of what we're building and how we're doing it.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Hopefully, hopefully it would land. But yeah, I'd love to anytime, man. I'd love to have you back too.
Oh,
let's do some more.
Great. And I love your approach to podcasting is it seems to me similar to what my approach to podcasting has become, which is like no agenda, just get on and talk. You know it's going to go in interesting directions. And I noticed that with other episodes of yours I've listened to, and I like that. There's no right or wrong way to podcast for sure, and people have different formats, and some people are very structured. But I really enjoy like if you and I were hanging out in person, which hopefully we'll be able to do someday soon.
Sure, right.
I think we'd be talking about pretty similar things, you know.
Yeah,
So
I think there would probably just be coffee in the middle. That's and we'd both be at the same table. Other than that, I think this is just I like that. I like that, and I enjoy that about yours too. It's just a stream of consciousness, and like it's two bass players talking about what it is and what it's not. That's the part I'm always interested in too, is what it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what it's not, but hearing other people's response to that is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Anyways, cool, man. Dude, thank you so much for doing the show. And we'll be in touch.
Bet. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, and seriously, like whenever you, I'm happy to chat whenever. But especially you like looking long term when we get out of this business. If you ever have something new coming up or coming out or whatever, my show is yours whenever you want it. If you want to, if you've got anything new launching, that's often a good time to chat. But I think especially right now, like. How the heck are people, not that, I don't think people need how to necessarily, but how did we do this, or how are we thinking about this? I think it'd just be really helpful when people are trying to figure out whatever it is, trying to teach
how
on
to organize a Patreon when they're releasing, course tiers or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's definitely not my area of expertise, but
yeah, right.
but people are wanting that for sure. So.
Yeah, right. I mean, you can make sure that the FBI, isn't tapping anything. That's your input. You can give that advice, like do a background check.
One of these days, I just all the people that were involved in that, except the people that were running the Ponzi scheme, are great people in the music ed world. And the only reason I haven't, it would be a very entertaining blog post or whatever. And I just haven't. I work with some of those people still, and I just don't want to embarrass anybody because I think everybody's kind of embarrassed about it. But man, so it's one of those stories. The guy that pulled me into that, I don't think that company was a Ponzi scheme. It was just the larger thing was he has talked openly about it like on other shows or whatever. So my sort of thing with that is like I will talk about it like till the cows come home, but I just don't want to like publicly like put out some sort of clickbaity thing. It would be so fun, but one of these days.
Except for the people running the Ponzi scheme. That was my favorite disclaimer of that. Everybody's good. Except for the people running the Ponzi scheme. Like, I think it kind of goes without saying. Ponzi scheme, folks, probably not the best. All right, dude. Thanks so much. We'll be in touch.
I appreciate it. All right, have a good one.
Dude.
Take it easy. All right,
All
bye.
Right, bye.
All right, that was my talk with Jason Heath. And I would like to give a shout out to Trevor Jones for connecting/reconnecting Jason and I. I had initially met Jason at the NAMM show, and we discussed being on each other's show, each other's podcast, and then I had an envelope full of cards that I just had to follow up with folks on, and I didn't get around to it. And Trevor was great. Trevor was great about linking me with Jason, and so thanks Trevor, appreciate that. I like the conversation about staying inspired to practice. Now, whatever that is for anyone, I think it's a worthwhile investigation kind of within the individual, like within yourself, figuring out what it is that really keeps you inspired to continue to want to grow as a musician at whatever level of playing you're playing at. If it's the professional level, a lot of times if it's the professional level, you're probably playing with dudes that are inspiring you. I know that is for me. Although, like right now, I'm not playing with anybody because of the whole quarantine business. But the people I get to work with are absolutely inspiring to me. Outside of that, within practice time, listening to new music is a thing for me. Transcribing is a thing for me. I like that for Jason. Jason found his with that app, and that app is kind of keeping him on what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of keeping him going. It keeps him excited about it. And so whatever that is, I think it's worth investigating. If you're feeling just kind of in a little bit of a rut in your practice time, there's so much YouTube content out there, and there's bound to be so much more. Maybe some of those will work for you. Just to stay inspired about continuing to learn and grow your musicianship. That's a big one. And it kind of took me a while. It took me a little while to figure that out, for myself. And now I got a decent handle on it, so when I finally start to hear it in my playing, that it's really in a rut, or that I just kind of feel it, that I'm not inspired. It's nothing new. I'm not. I know how to get myself out of it quicker. The rut still happens. That's just what it is. The rut still happens, but I know how to get myself out of it quicker. And I know some ways to deal with it. Listening to new music, that's a huge one. And across all genres, actually, like I spend a bunch of time either transcribing jazz or like session guys. The music that I'm transcribing in my personal life, this is also my personal life, but in my personal time with music, I will listen to something completely different, just to connect with another aspect of music. Sometimes it's country radio. That happens. I'll do that and check into that. Sometimes it's classical, sometimes it's whatever. It can be any number of things. But I'll just check into something new. So, going through a bunch of Ray Brown or something. Okay, I want a little bit of a break from jazz. So I'm going to get into something else, or get into later jazz or something. Some more I hate to use the word contemporary because that kind of implies smooth jazz. I don't go there. But I mean more of the modern thing, guys that are still alive and creating. So that's a big one, folks. Whatever it is, continue to stay inspired. Now is a good time to, we all have some time to really check that out for ourselves, and there's going to be so many resources online, and there already is, and people offering so many things that it shouldn't be that difficult. But I do support the agenda of purposely looking to always be inspired musically. That's what I got. So thank you, Jason, for being on the show. Thank you, Trevor. And that's Jason's story. Check out the Contrabass Conversations. Again, I have links up at thebasshed.com. Definitely subscribe to that. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe to this. And that's what I got, folks. I will catch you on the next one.